Good afternoon, NBA fans everywhere. Today is the trade deadline, or rather was the trade deadline at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, be sure to like the page. Like SB Nation NBA. If you're watching this on YouTube Live, like it, subscribe. We're all very grateful. We have all sorts of excellent and plentiful content coming constantly. But this was a hugely mediocre NBA trade deadline. I'm joined by Mike Prada, SB Nation NBA editor, and, of course, co-host with Ben Epstein of our NBA podcast, Limited Upside. So I will start with this. Ben, as your first appearance on SB Nation's
Thanks,
Live,
Dan.
Prada's a seasoned veteran. Who do you think won as much as anybody can win because of their activity leading up to the trade deadline?
Sure. So involving actual activity,
Yes.
making moves happen, I think Detroit's the clear winner from the last couple days, not just today's deadline. Obviously, they made the first big move, the first kind of chip to fall was Tobias Harris yesterday.
Yep.
I think in moving Tobias Harris, Orlando kind of got rid of one of their many shooters who can't really play, and Detroit needed that guy to kind of be the kind of
I
the
thought you were
right
going to say shooters who can't really shoot.
Shooters,
but yeah.
well, shooters who can't really shoot, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Missers.
Detroit
Yeah.
needed the guy to kind of complement Drummond. We know what Drummond's strengths
Right.
are. We also know what his weaknesses are. Tobias Harris is a good yin and yang combination there, I think. They also were able to get rid of a redundant point guard piece in Jennings in
Yep.
that deal, someone who kind of had paid his dues for Van Gundy, or for Detroit in that matter, come back from his injury, showed he had some value left, and so they were able to move him. They also didn't have to get rid of, I believe, a first-round pick in that situation, which a lot of other picks, Tobias, or other players in this trade deadline,
Right.
first-round picks are obviously valuable. They're able to get Harris without moving them. So I look at Detroit as one of the clear winners. They also brought in Monte Eunice from Houston in a separate
If
deal.
healthy, is a quality piece.
And can help them next year even.
Right.
You know, it's one of those things where not every trade you make right now has to be for right now. It can also be, call it Will Barton from last year, really helped Denver this year,
Right.
which was part of a flawless trade last year. So I thought that was good. And then also bring in Marcus Thornton, a little heat check guy.
Sure.
He can gun it the same way Jennings did for him already.
All right, is there, in terms of future assets, a team that won the trade deadline? Not necessarily bringing in a player who can contribute now, but down the line, draft picks, whatever. Anybody win that for you?
It's interesting. I think that Phoenix did a great job of kind of making sure that they were able to get something here. They're not building for this year. We know that.
Yes.
We'll get into the trade they made a little later. Mike's Wizards are involved with that. We'll let him stew on that a little bit. But I definitely think it's interesting when you can get a first-round pick, put the protections where you like it so that it does qualify this year. They have a much
Right.
better case for the draft, which is the next step for that franchise now.
And they maybe get 2 lottery picks. I'm with you on Detroit. I'm not totally wild about the price they gave for Monte Eunice, but Tobias Harris, that's a home run trade.
Yep.
Also because he's under contract for 3 more years at a really good number, and he can grow with that core. Conversely, I think the biggest loser of this trade deadline is Orlando. You know, I think that if you're Orlando,
So much full circle going on with Scott Skiles.
it's
this
so
deadline.
much full
Yeah.
circle.
It's
It
a story of
takes
his
2
NBA
guys I think there are 2 problems. One, this is what happens when you have expectations that are out of line, I think, with where you're at. They
Right.
want to make the playoffs. They rush this trade. I don't understand why you would trade Tobias Harris for that. If you're going to resign him,
Yep.
why trade him for that? You
That's right.
obviously want something more.
Concrete, yeah.
It's been said Markieff Morris goes for a first-round pick. Danaz Montejunas goes for a first-round pick.
Yep.
Jeff Green goes for a first-round pick. How does Tobias Harris not go for a first-round pick?
Lance is gone.
If Doc was the GM of every team, everybody would go for a first-round
That's
pick.
true.
This is true.
They should've just-
Everybody gets a first-round
You
pick.
get a first-round pick. That's right.
They should have traded with the Clippers.
That's right.
And then the other thing is they're trying to clear all this money now for to have cap room. I think they have
Yeah.
enough for 2 max contracts next summer. That's all well and good, but the entire league has cap room.
Right.
And I guess I don't understand why this is the summer they are going for this. I guess their logic is we have Florida, we have nice weather, but just last summer, Paul Millsap turned down more money from them. And I don't think the team is in a significantly better spot winning-wise than they are right now. I mean, maybe that's an addition by subtraction move.
Now, Orlando's kind of had the back tires in the mud now for 4 or 5 years, where at some point you feel like it's going to come out of that rut, but they're unable to fully push out of it. And some of it's the redundancy in the players,
Right.
which they're addressing right now. Some of it's the coaching turnover. Kind of the idea that when you want to win with a bunch of young lottery picks, ultimately maybe that doesn't work out, and then you have to decide who you're going to trade.
And
that's
if
kind of
none
where
of them
they're
are any superstar potential, the only
right.
lottery picks. They're all kind of decent. And so to me, that's a clear loser. And then the other team that I'm nervous about,
Here it is.
I think we disagree a little bit.
I like this.
I'm nervous about what the Wizards did to get Markieff
Why?
Morris. I think there's a lot of logic to what they did. He's a talented player. He definitely fills a position of need. He's got a good contract. They, I think, still have enough room to make a big signing with him.
Okay.
But I think the price was very high. I think first-round picks are very valuable in this new climate, especially because the cap's going up.
That's right.
But the first-round pick scale is staying the same.
And that's the loophole here.
Yeah.
That is.
To me, that's a potential lottery pick if they don't make the playoffs.
Yep.
And Markieff Morris is, just kind of had a rough year. And is that the guy you want to gamble on at this point?
So is your biggest issue here what they gave up, what actual pieces that moved in the trade, or Markieff Morris, the basketball player?
Oh, well, I think it's connected, right? I think every trade you're taking a risk on some level. And I think the best trades are the ones that in different ways minimize that risk. So you look at Detroit getting Tobias Harris. That might not work out.
Right.
But they didn't give up that much to do it. They have great cost certainty. And while he's had trouble on the court, it's all accounts he's a good guy, someone who's committed to improving. If it doesn't work, it's not because of a character flaw.
How old is he?
Tobias Harris?
Morris. I'm sorry.
He's mid-20s. I forget exactly what it is.
Right.
But Markieff Morris demanded a trade, is involved in assault charges, has pouted his way the entire year.
Yeah.
To me, this is another example with the Wizards of kind of outsized expectations. They feel like they have to make the playoffs.
Sure.
And so they make a move that to me carries, it could work very well, but to me carries a lot of risk.
All right,
and that's what makes me nervous.
Let me jump in right here. Who are your winners and losers of inactivity? Who are you expecting more from in terms of actual movement?
I'll jump
Let's
in
start
with
Ben.
a winner real quick.
Yes.
Because I think the losers are a little bit larger names here, a little higher profile. Mike, you could tackle that. I think Boston's a winner here. I know there are a lot of Boston fans. Sorry, Boston. I apologize for calling you a winner, I guess, because you didn't make a trade. But I think they are winners. They're sitting on the largest cachet of assets in the entire world of sports, any level of any sport professionally. So it would almost behoove them to kind of see what those can equal in a fair market, which is not what the NBA trade deadline is. It was a seller or a buyer's market. It was a seller's market. It kind of fluctuated over and over until nothing happened. So I think those picks have a lot more value either translating. These are the Brooklyn picks, their pick, the Mavericks pick. I mean, they're not going to draft all of them, but there are moves, and we see this all the time, that get made at the actual draft that are usually a lot larger in scale.
Mike, your inactivity, winners or losers, who jumped out to you?
I think there are two. One, as a team, I think Atlanta lost by not cashing in on some of their players. I understand why they didn't. That's a tough team to break up in that market, which has had so much trouble with fan support. But I think there was a window here where everybody thinks they're a buyer, that they could have gotten something for Al Horford or Jeff Teague. And ultimately, I think there are too many. There's another example of like kind of where are you?
Yep.
That team's not winning a title. If you're just thinking in terms of basketball, that's a good time, I think, to move on. Obviously, they didn't get the offers they wanted, but I imagine that the offers they thought they were going to get are higher than the threshold I think they should have accepted. I would have started to move on if I were them. And then the player losers, Dwight Howard. I think this is I understand a lot of teams were nervous about acquiring him because basically you're acquiring him for the right to either let him go or pay too much money to keep him.
Right.
I understand the reluctance, and I understand what Houston is trying to do for trading him, but to me, that guy needs a change of scenery.
It would appear that way.
Things are really
like every 3 months.
I was going to say.
He needs to change the scenery.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ben, what about you?
I mean, look, I think that when it comes to the players who necessarily didn't get moved, I think Horford's a big one. And not just because I know you mentioned Atlanta, but I looked at Horford as a piece that actually would change how the Eastern Conference went. I thought that he made a lot of sense on Boston. But because he didn't move, I still think the Hawks sit right in that middle of the Eastern Conference, which I think was probably the initiative here, was to get out of the middle in one way or another. And there are a lot of teams, and we talked about this a little beforehand, guys, but the way that MLB added an extra wild card, it made a lot of teams feel like they could make the playoffs. Well, now we have this hierarchy in the NBA where the top teams are way high up there, the bottom teams are way below there, and there are 23 teams all vying for, call it, the last 4, 5, 6 spots in each of the conferences. So a lot more teams felt like they were closer to the playoff spots than they actually are, which might make a team like the Hawks more hesitant to trade, Boston more hesitant to make a trade, Houston more hesitant, and we're talking Houston was a Final Four team last year. So maybe they still see themselves in a way that they actually really aren't. And perception and reality are everything here.
I think it's a great point. I think that is why I think Atlanta may have missed a chance to kind of be the one seller.
Yes, I'm going to jump right in. We have a lightning round of Facebook questions from the audience. Thank you, Facebook. All right, first question from Mallory. I'll give this to, let's go to Prada. Biggest team trade losers, the Bulls of inactivity. They lose Heinrich, but that's just for trade purposes or cap purposes.
I think, yes, that's a team that I think is also sort of in the Atlanta spot.
Right.
They probably need to kind of look in themselves in the mirror. At the same time, I'm not sure what I guess they could have traded Pau Gasol.
What was really out there,
That didn't quite go through. it's another example of, pending free agent Ryan Anderson is the same way.
True.
Teams just don't want to give up that much for those guys.
Right.
Yep.
And other than that, I think they may have asked a little too much for Taj Gibson, but their front court is decimated. They've got nothing. They need him.
Yep.
So I think they're kind of just boxed in general. It's hard for me to look at them and say they missed the big move that they should have made.
Ben, can Morris fit in with, Mike again, can Morris fit in with Wall and Beal, play style-wise?
Well, that's an interesting one because I think there's a very interesting player in Markieff Morris somewhere. Someone, this playmaking four, who can defend, who can pass, who's got a great mid-range game, can shoot a bit. Someone you can give the ball to down the block late in games. I think 2 years ago he was one of the top clutch players in the league. The problem is that he's got so many bad habits to fix. He takes too many bad jumpers. He doesn't try hard enough on defense. If you really focused him, that guy could be really good for you. You can play the 4, you can play the 5. You can see why teams like him. But you have to get him focused on what's right.
He gives you guys a dimension, though, the Wizards did not have 3 hours ago.
A more athletic guy on the block.
That can go 5 and be a court spacing 5, and Nelly Gortat doesn't necessarily have to match up with, call it, Tristan Thompson.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. No question. I mean, if he's locked in, that is great value and a great contract with a really interesting player.
Well, if there's a coach,
just skeptical.
If there's a coach who can get the most out of his guys, it's Randy Whitman.
Final question. You guys can, either one of you field this. The Grizz, very, very active.
Yeah.
I know you guys have a lot of thoughts about what their current lineup looks like. How will you evaluate, how do you evaluate their deadline moves?
The last team in the world that I'd want to get into a street fight with,
Sure.
times 1,000, the first team that I'd want to go get my first tattoo with.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they don't have street fights in the playoffs. They play basketball.
That's true,
not street
right?
fights.
Which they might not make. But no, I think the Grizz made an interesting trade. Anytime that Doc is going to be shopping a guy, and we saw this 2 weeks ago, he started playing Lance ramped minutes.
Right.
His minutes started increasing, a little showcase, but just enough to give you a taste. And a taste of Lance is kind of appealing. We've seen this in small spurts, even for a full season with the Pacers. So I think kind of what they needed to get after they lost Courtney Lee was someone, or they traded Courtney Lee, I should say, is someone who can kind of do a little bit more of it. Lance can play point. He can, not play point, but he can bring the ball up. He can be a physical specimen of a two-guard.
The best of Lance, yes.
The best of Lance.
Yeah.
And maybe Zebo and the rest of the supporting cast there, Anderson, New there, they have some veterans might be able to wrangle him in. So maybe what they're banking on is that they are going to get the best of Lance because, well, we already know what the best of Jeff Green is.
Yes.
And it comes once every 3-4 weeks for about a quarter.
Yes. Prada, quickly, any other thoughts to add to the Grizz's day?
I'm confused by what they're doing. I'm confused by why you would trade your one good shooter in Courtney Lee.
Yep.
And then acquire Lance Stevenson. You make one sell move and then you get Lance. You get a first-round pick back. That's nice, but they have incentive to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs, their pick goes to Denver.
Yep.
So I guess I'm just not quite sure why they needed. I know. Look, they need picks. They already lost their 2019 pick from the first Green trade they made. It's nice to get one back, but to me, that's a team that should probably have sat out entirely. It would have been better off. At the end of the day, they would have been better off with the team they had than the team they have right now. And I don't think the future stuff they got is good enough. I'm very confused by that.
Okay. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
It's all the time we have. Did you have anything quickly? I can give you 5 seconds.
No, that's fine.
You're good?
Totally.
What do you have? What do you have?
I was just going to ask Mike if Marc Gasol getting injured had anything to do with these moves, but it probably doesn't matter.
You know what the answer is? The answer is go to SBNation.com.
That's right.
That's right.
To learn more of all sorts of NBA coverage and storylines. They do a terrific job. And he's their editor. Thank you very much for watching either on YouTube or Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the page, like the live show. If you're watching on Facebook and I see you, slap that like button on the Facebook SB Nation NBA page. All sorts of fun content. Thank you everybody for watching. Do follow SB Nation NBA. All sorts of goodness happening online. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.
All right, cool. Thanks.